So, we looked for some time at why kids are not learning or why they have poor learning outcomes. And if you take a region like the Middle East and North Africa, where they're spending so much money on education and it's part of every development strategy, yet they have some of the lowest outcomes in the world. And so that begged the question that what is it that we're not looking at beyond the technical issues like access to education, like the quality issues of management and financing. And I realized that it's really the political economy that we're not focusing sufficiently on. Education is a complex process that requires a lot of factors and actors coming together, and that's what determines the outcomes of the education system. So that can be captured really in four sets of tensions, I believe. Um, when I say that, I mean the political economy aspects of education. These tensions are tension between credentials and skills, where there's so much focus on that degree, that certificate, that diploma, more so than the set of skills and knowledge that it's supposed to reflect. And so increasingly parents and society wanted children to have those, or graduates to have those degrees, and less focused on them being skilled. Um, the, some writers describe this as a credentialist equilibrium, where there aren't sufficient signals from the labor market for the need for skills, but there is a high demand for credentials, and so in return, parents and students request that from the education system. You kind of become stuck in that equilibrium. And the second set of tensions is on discipline and inquiry. In a lot of conservative societies, such as those in the Middle East and North Africa, but also around the world, there's a lot of emphasis on discipline, where a child needs to behave in a certain way, and that it's in itself is not a bad thing, but too much discipline stunts a child's creativity and ability to learn through experimentation and inquiry. And so, approaches such as rote memorization, which is part of this sort of disciplined approach, does not allow the child to really effectively learn, where they're just repeating things that they memorized. The third set of tensions is control and autonomy. And I'm not saying control versus autonomy or credentials versus skills, because they're related. And so between control and autonomy, I think there is a balance that needs to be met. And it's to what extent should systems control what children learn, and to what extent they should allow students to have the autonomy to learn from various resources, to allow teachers to find different resources, to allow schools to be independent. And it's a difficult balance, but it's an important balance, because if you control the education process or centralize it, you again lose the opportunity for kids who learn in different ways, or teachers who can teach in different ways. And the fourth set and last set of tensions relates to tradition and modernity. And again, that's a very serious tension in conservative societies, where they feel it's critical to do things as they have been taught and as they have been for centuries, because any change of that will really get into issues of values and culture. And so when you introduce a new way of learning or a new way of teaching, it creates a sense of insecurity that values are being questioned. And so usually these societies hold on very tight to traditional ways. And unless you address those four tensions that really play out through curriculum and pedagogy, and they play out in the classroom, in the school, I don't think we'll be able to unleash the potential of education for children, not just in MENA, but around the world. So we came up with an approach that looks at what we call the 3 Ps, which is a greater push for learning, and by learning I mean not just schooling, but ensuring that kids are learning. And that push requires starting very early with early childhood development, because that's really where the child's brain is more receptive, and then they can come to school ready. It also involves working with teachers, ensuring that the best teachers are selected, they're also supported, and they're deployed to the right places. What you find in a lot of countries is the best students end up being in the cities, where you actually need them, where the situation is harder and more challenging. It also deals with measuring learning. Unless you know where a child is, it's very hard to help that child learn. Technology plays a very important part in this area, because it can enable teachers to teach, and it can enable students to learn better. So these are some of the areas you need to look at when you're pushing more for learning. Language of instruction is another absolutely critical area. The second P is about a pull for skills. And a pull for skills, because you cannot work in a vacuum where the education system is just producing skills. But it has to be skills that are relevant in society, that are relevant in the labor market. And so there is an important role for the private sector to send out the right signals to the education system and to parents to demand skills, and to hold schools accountable for the kinds of skills that they are teaching their children. The third P is a new pact for education. And that means that really citizens of countries need to come together and agree on what their vision is for a student or a graduate who goes through the education system. What kind of traits or characteristics do we want to see in that student? And then work towards that. And so putting the child at the heart of the education question. There's a lot of national dialogue and debates in that area, but people have different interests, and they compete around these interests, and it's the student that really pays the price for that. So 3 Ps will help us in unleashing the potential of education. So I think education is everyone's business. In the past, we sort of blame teachers and we blame ministries of education, but it's everyone's business. So at the community level, it's households, it's parents. They have to play an important role to ensure that their child is not just going to school, but is learning. The private sector has a very critical role to play. Media is important, because they're the ones who spread the messaging around education, and they can help build that consensus around what kind of education a child needs to have. Leadership is important, and leadership is not just at the political level in terms of presidents, etc., but leadership at the community level. Community leaders, religious leaders in some settings play a very important role in passing on the messaging, and in also helping society as a whole be accountable. So I'm a natural optimist. That's why I work in this field. I think a lot is happening in the world, and there's a lot of good examples. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's just adapting a lot of what we see that works. I think that with technology, it's easier now to find ways to explore different approaches to learning. Kids are kids. They always are eager to explore, to learn. We need to allow them that space. I think there's increasing recognition of that around the world. So I am an optimist. I think we're going in the right direction. The debates are focusing on the right set of issues. I hope that every child has the chance to reach their full potential through education.